Where does Habib rank in the overall pound for pound picture? Welcome, everybody. It's All Day OJ, Mr. Wells, breaking down Khabib Nurmagomedov's retirement after UFC 254. He asked the promotion to be ranked number one pound for pound. Jon Jones took a little bit of issue with that. First, he said, you know what? Here you go, Khabib. And then 2 hours later was like, nah, this is, you're disrespecting me. That's mine. You can't just ask for that. Sparked a whole conversation about this. Really, where does Khabib rank in the pound for pound picture? 29-0, undefeated at lightweight, went through some monsters his last 4 or 5 fights. Matt, I'm going to turn it over to you. What do you think? Where does he rank here?
So first off, you have to kind of like understand, at least in my opinion, what pound for pound means. And I think it's more of a fluid ranking than any other ranking system in the UFC, right? In general, that's how it's supposed to be in any combat sport and boxing as well. It's supposed to be more fluid with what have you done for me lately type of thing, right? It's not an all-time ranking list. And I think that's where Jon Jones may have gotten a little bit confused on this, because if you compare the recent outings to Khabib and compare those to Jon Jones, who looks to be the more dominant fighter? I would say it's Khabib, hands down. He's out there mauling people. He's not giving them a chance to do anything. Jon Jones has been in close fights lately. Arguably, Jon Jones lost a fight recently. So I scored that fight for Dominick Reyes, sitting cage side. And I was like, I can't believe I'm typing this out, but Jon Jones just lost. And then, of course, the judges, whatever. So I think that's part of the thing that Jon is getting lost on here, is that this should, when you're compiling your pound for pound rankings, it should be about how you have looked in your recent outings versus your overall career. Like, obviously their overall career is included in that as well. You're not going to have somebody who just went on a 5-fight win streak that's got a 500 record show up on your pound for pound list. No, but it's the guys that are champions. It's the guys that do have the undefeated records, but it's also, what have you done for me lately? And to me, that kind of gives you the clear answer as to who should be in the number one rankings.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, when you're looking at pound for pound, right, those change all the time. If a champion is listed and then they drop the belt, they drop, right? Or they disappear sometimes and the new guy takes the spot. They are fluid. And right now, I don't know how you can argue that Jon Jones looks better than Khabib when I thought he arguably lost his last 2 fights. I mean, I scored Santos versus Jones. I scored it for Santos, though very, very close that one was. I could see that go either way. But Reyes versus Jones, I'm with you 100%. Not sure what the judges were looking at, but that looked like a clear 48-47 for Dominick Reyes for me. Whereas Khabib has gone out and made guys that have looked like killers, look just like they're newbies. I mean, I've never seen Justin Gaethje look so lost in my entire life. If you go back and watch every single one of his fights, never seen him look so lost. It looked like he didn't know what to do. Like he was just overwhelmed by the moment. It was insane. Even when Gaethje has lost before to Dustin Poirier or Eddie Alvarez, he was in there throwing, he ate a shot and ended up going down. This was, I don't know what to do. I'm struggling. I'm throwing what I can. Pressure's constantly on me. And then I get choked out and made to look like the entire run I just had, poof, nothing. So, I mean, for me, it's clear that Khabib should be the number one pound for pound right now. And I agree that pound for pound is a fluid list. And now that he's retired, I mean, he will eventually drop out of that spot. It's natural. That being said, let's move on to the GOAT talk. Greatest of all time. Where does Khabib rank in that? Again, 29-0. He's beaten Rafael dos Anjos, Al Iaquinta, which I got to throw Al in there just because, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. I mean, where do you put him in that GOAT talk?
He's definitely in the conversation, and that's a very short list for me. Obviously, you have Khabib, you have Jon Jones, you have your GSP, you have Fedor, if you want to go heavyweight when you're talking about GOATs, right? Right now, if I had to rank it, I would still have Jon Jones number one overall when you're talking about GOAT, because the man does have significantly more title defenses in a division that had more champions, where he took out, more former champions than Khabib did. But it's a close argument. Like, I'm not going to like hang my hat on that and be like, or I'm not going to die on that hill defending Jon Jones as number one GOAT. I mean, because it's a subjective argument anyways. But sometimes like subjective arguments can get a little wonky when somebody's like, "Oh, Conor McGregor's the GOAT." I'm like, is he though? So there's some names that just don't belong in that conversation where other ones definitely have their place, and you can make that argument. And I'd be like, all right, that's how you feel. It's a personal opinion. But I mean, Habib's definitely in there. And one thing that will clearly determine it for me is that we have to see how Jon Jones ends his career. Like, if he goes up to heavyweight and gets knocked out a couple of times, then that kind of tarnishes his legacy a little bit, because he dropped the belt and walked away from, continued dominance in the division, right? So if he does that and stumbles a little bit, yeah, that hurts him for the overall GOAT conversation, especially considering he was teasing the heavyweight move for almost a decade, it seems, right? Or at least, people like us were talking about jumping to heavyweight when he was dominating literally everybody at 205. So it just depends. I mean, walking out on top as an undefeated fighter with the title, that doesn't happen. One of the most famous sayings in MMA is like, you're going to catch a loss at some point, right? Like, not if your name's Khabib Nurmagomedov, right? He did it the right way. Like, he did what people dream of. And of course, some of us are saying, yeah, it's a little premature. We want to see more. We never got the Ferguson fight. Do we really need it though for his legacy? Especially after what he did to Gaethje? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, those are great points. It's one of those things where, I mean, for me, I personally, I will take a couple of losses and be okay with it. I mean, GSP is number one for me in pound for pound GOAT. He's avenged his 2 losses and, has gone through champion in 2 divisions. And Jones, whether or not you want to add in the, how do we want to say this? Substance stipulations in terms of the GOAT conversation, right? Because Jones has been suspended multiple times for steroids, and not things that are, growth hormone or whatever, like things that you cannot find in the human body. So
yeah, picogram. Like, he gave us a whole nother thing that's just like, oh, we have to accept this now as normal. Okay.
He made an event move from Vegas to California with 1 week to go. I mean, if I had bought tickets to that and I had already had my hotel and everything scheduled, I can't even imagine. Anyway, point is, I mean, that's got to come into the conversation a little bit, but let's say we exclude that. All right. Let's not, Nate Diaz, everybody's on steroids. Let's just go ahead and take that out. Even if you're taking that out, it's one of those things where Khabib's legacy and his pound for pound status, his GOAT status, I think will be very similar to his pound for pound status, just because he didn't fight and have as many title defenses, and he hasn't fought everyone, right? Like, his last 5 fights are, aside from Rafael dos Anjos, are his only notable fights. I mean, some of the other wins on there are Daryl Horcher, a project manager that was fighting part-time. Or, like people that you can't look at and say like, oh, that's a quality win. And so I think it's one of those things where I totally understand Khabib retiring the way he did. It makes a lot of sense for him. I think right now he still runs through Ferguson and just about anybody else in the lightweight division. But I think because he's retiring when he is, his GOAT status 3 or 4 years from now may be diminished, because I can count 6 quality wins of this is high caliber opponents. Jones ran through everybody there was in the division over, a decade. It's hard to say when you look at his resume, even if he goes out and gets knocked out 6 times at heavyweight, it's hard to say, oh, he didn't fight the best guys at light heavyweight. Nurmagomedov is, yes, he's fought the best right now, but he hasn't established that long duration of dominance we've seen GSP or even Anderson Silva to some extent, right? Like, I mean, that I think will end up hurting him a little bit.
No, yeah, that's also a great point. And one of the things is that he's only did it at 155, right? Like GSP did it 2 weight classes. And that's kind of one of the things that kind of does get overblown when you're talking about GOAT conversations, because that kind of skews more towards pound for pound for me, at least while you're active, because it's like, hey, what's more indicative of being a pound for pound fighter than doing it in multiple divisions, right? Like that's kind of the whole point. It's like, do your skills translate to another weight class, and can you get it done? So, I mean, if you're a 2 division champion, like that goes miles for me, at least in terms of that argument. But one of the reasons like I don't put Fedor as my heavyweight GOAT, for example, is because he's still around and he's had so many losses. Like when he was at his peak, again, like he's like the pound for pound guy, right? But in terms of overall career, can you say he's the GOAT at heavyweight right now? I don't think so. I mean, I think you have to go with Stipe, in my opinion, because Stipe is the guy that's out there just, making it look easy. And, he's the guy that's gotten better over the years in recent years. And, depending on what he does within the next year, I think that's going to solidify that for a lot of people. But it's always a fun argument to have, because some people get so heated about it. Like I'm sure someone's watching this video right now and they're screaming mad at me saying, screaming. How is Fedor not your GOAT? Like, go ahead and leave that in the comments. I know somebody's out there watching. Go ahead. But that's just how I feel about it. If you stick around too long and you start catching losses, like, are you really going to tell me Tyron Woodley's legacy isn't hurt right now? Like if Tyron retired before the Usman fight, where would he be on your GOAT list? He'd be a lot higher than he is right now. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's I think the only combat sports athlete where it's maybe unaffected and it probably also had something to do just because of the phenomenon that he was Ali, right? Like, I mean, because at the end of Ali's boxing career, that dude was losing all sorts of ways. It was ugly.
Yes,
but
it was brutal
he was such a yeah. But he was such a legend, and we didn't have social media, we didn't have the internet, all that, and he just was out there and created that whole persona and everything that I think he could get away with that. Nowadays, I think you're right. I think it's it's hard to not look at Tyron Woodley and say, okay. It's hard to not look at BJ Penn and say like, what if or Rousey, who had talked about retiring a couple times before she fought Holm. I mean, what if Rousey retires before Holm and then just walks away? We'd be talking about Rousey being the greatest of all time women's fighter, hands down. Nunes wouldn't even be there. And so it's yeah, I'm with you that those losses do diminish it, and we'll see. Because if Jones gets knocked out, even if it's heavyweight, he gets knocked out a couple times, or if he tries to go back and fight Jan and he loses, I mean, I think that is a hard hit to his legacy. So yeah, and as Matt said, go ahead and drop your comments. Tell us who you think the GOAT is. Like and subscribe to the channel, of course. Matt, anything else to say on this subject?
Just to really drive home the fact that there is a difference between a pound for pound and a GOAT ranking list. Those names that you just mentioned a second ago, the BJ Penns of the world, where are they on the pound for pound list today? They're not there because they're not active fighters. So it is very much a what have you done for me lately list. So Jon Jones going on your Twitter rant, chill out, buddy. Chill out. You're still the GOAT in a lot of people's eyes. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, that's a really good point, John. You just need to just do some other stuff, man. Or take a fight. How about you do that? How about just take a fight? Let's just